Okay. Mine is page 12, 13. Is that? We just finished a section on karma, and now we're going on to a series. Again, remember, this is a chapter where on behalf of the assembly, Manjushri Bodhisattva is asking for clarification on key principles. So tonight we're starting a new section. Manjushri is asking about the one and the many. Basically, this whole thing's about the one and the many. So let's please voice a little, and then I'll be quieter, and it'll sound like it's good Chinese. 是文殊师利菩萨，闻得修菩萨言，佛子如来所悟，为是一法，云何乃说无量诸法？上无量刹华，无量中，言无量灵音，识无量身，知无量心，现无量相同. And so let's pause there. So the text reads, basically, we'll just go with the translation. Sometimes, though, as we're moving along, those of you who know the Chinese, if you see that the English translation doesn't quite get it, you can jump in and make a suggestion. Don't feel shy. We're just at the early stages, really, of translating these wisdom texts into English. And sometimes the English isn't quite there for them. I'm not making a cultural comment there, but sometimes we don't have English equivalents. At the same time, sometimes the Chinese, you know the character, you don't know the meaning. This is a problem sometimes with these texts. So we work on it together. One of the signs is, one, if you really know the Chinese, you can say, oh, this is a misreading of that character. And this happened, by the way, historically, because often the texts were rendered from an oral tradition, so the scribe who was putting it down could have heard a different tone for a character and put that down. And in most cases, you would spot a discrepancy, but sometimes it's subtle, and you can end up with a different character than was originally intended. That's one thing that happens. So if you see something where you think the character is, how should we say, a scribal error, that's what they call it. In other words, it was the wrong character was put in there. You can say it. Those of you who don't, though, have that background, you might look at the English and say, there's something here in the English that doesn't seem to render, and then you go, it's a more subtle, intuitive process that it doesn't accord with the underlying and overarching spirit of the teachings. So then something resonates wrong. It's like, this sounds really, let's say, nihilistic. The translation sounds awfully nihilistic, or loose, playing loose with it, too much license. And you get a feeling, you get an intuition that somehow this doesn't sit right. Now, it may be two things happen in that case. It's not sitting right because it's a bad translation, and your intuitive Dharma eye or Dharma ear, whatever you want to call it, got a little twang. And you can begin there. You don't want to end there, because often the Dharma ear and the Dharma eye, well, they're a little cataract and wax, and it's like it's not necessarily true. But the other thing in the translation process, if you doesn't sound right, it could be that the translation's wrong, or it was meant purposely to rub you in some way. So these texts are not like once upon a time and they lived happily ever after. kind of stories. Often these are delivered with a therapeutic thrust, which is meant to rub you and stir you up around, to think things over. Basically, these are texts for awakening, and they're delivered to beings who are asleep. So what happens in the morning when the alarm goes off? Oh, thank you. It's so nice. I appreciate it. And, you whack it, you slam it, you curse at it or whatnot, because it's telling you to wake up. Not unlike some of these texts. And if you see the relationship sometimes between the students and the teachers, it's similar. Not always the case. Sometimes there's praise and support and encouragement, and then sometimes there's scoldings and rubbings and abrasion. And all of this is meant to, well, the text tonight is going to go into this, why there's so many dharmas. Anyhow, here we go. At that time, Manjushri Bodhisattva asked virtuous leader Bodhisattva, disciple of the Buddha, all thus come ones enlighten to only one dharma. Now here, it's very interesting because I've mentioned this before. I don't think it's a good translation to say the Buddha or the thus come one. And here, obviously, the translator has chosen Wanshu Shirli Pusa, Wanda Shuo Pusa Yan Foza, Rulai Sowu. There is no plural or singular indicated there, is there? I mean, those of you who know the Chinese, the Rulai could be the thus come one. But here the translator chose, and I think favorably, to say thus come ones, all thus come ones. And the reason I'm saying this is, one, the text does talk about myriad Buddhas and Bodhisattvas on infinitum, okay? But there's a mind ground basic here. If all beings have the Buddha nature, then all can become thus come ones and Buddhas. So you open up the egalitarian thrust of this by translating it into the plural. Now, you might want to do that. You might want to say, oh, I'm just going to become a Buddha and nobody else can because I'm special. Yeah, well, that's not the spirit of the text. So you want to be, I guess, at the very least, democratic. Disciple of the Buddha, all the thus come ones enlightened to only one Dharma. Why then do they explain innumerable dharmas? Why do they appear in innumerable Buddha lands? Why do they transform innumerable sentient beings? Why do they expound innumerable different sounds? Why do they manifest innumerable bodies? And then innumerable bodies is, let's see, the innumerable is Wu Liang, right? Liang is also measure or number, so literally without number. Innumerable bodies. How do they know the innumerable minds? Now, just question, what minds is it talking about here? The innumerable minds. Any sense of that? How's that? You got to go a little louder for my poor ears.
Delusional minds.
Delusional. Ah. But it does plural. Everybody's. Okay, so the Xin here is standard translated as mind. In this tradition, in this understanding, especially in the Chinese with Chinese philosophy, Xin is really rendered as heart-mind, not just mind. It includes both the emotional and affective as well as the cognitive and consciousness. So it's the events and the activities of consciousness, of human consciousness, is all conveyed in this one character, Xin. So it could mean thoughts, it could mean ideas, but it can also be feelings, impulses, habits, intentionalities, and so forth. So innumerable minds doesn't mean all those functions of the mind, maybe, but it could mean that. In other words, the states of mind of any living, my mind, if I wanted to say, where did my mind go today? I'd have to pluralize. I really would. You could say, really, you did, and you thought, and you felt all of that in one mind? No, there had to be, you were juggling minds here. So it could refer to a single mind, how it proliferates into all this sort of activity. But it also could refer to, from living being to living being to living being, the mentality, the basic orientation, the thought ways, the habits are very different, very different. If you're thinking of it from a doctor's point of view, you just look at the differences in bodies. It's all the human body, right? There's a heart, there's a kidney, and so on and so forth. And yet, the height, the weight, the density, the musculature, the kinesthetic sense, the skin color and tone, and on and on and on. I go for a walk by there's a little elementary school around the corner where I take a walk, and usually, I think I walk during playtime or recess, but no matter when I walk, it seems like it's recess. So I don't know if that's the new school system. Don't push the kids. So they always have recess. Anyhow, when the kids are out there playing, I just look, and there's so much variation in the children. I mean, it's just like all these wild flowers, and they're all flowers, okay, but wow. And what they scream and yell at and what they get excited about, very, very different. What they cry about and fight over, very, very different. What they share and don't share, very, very different. I mean, it just on one little playground. So you just expand this, the whole world's like this. Sometimes you wonder, how do we actually get along or communicate? Because the differences are so marked. But here, it could referring to that, the innumerable different minds of living beings. Why did they demonstrate innumerable spiritual penetrations? This has to do with the spiritual abilities, or you could say the psychic abilities of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that have attained access to this. And again, just to come back to the basics of this, these are not special qualities that only apply to sort of divine beings. This is represented as a natural functioning of the opening and uncovering of a potential that any one of us have. So this is very interesting. This is not sort of limited to any realm per se, because from the 10 realms up, the potential is still there, although very differently realized between the 6 realms and then the 4 sagely realms. So even among arhats and pratyeka Buddhas, bodhisattvas and Buddhas, there's a continuum, but it's a continuum and not a demarcation of one says and one doesn't. So, yeah, I won't do that, but it's clearly one of those penetrations has to do with knowing the thoughts of others, and another one has to do with knowing past lives. And when the Buddha was asked at one time how to want to acquire that, he simply says, clear the mind, purify the mind, and you will automatically see this as sure as you're looking at an apple in the palm of your hand. But if you don't purify the mind, including purify it from craving and wanting these spiritual penetrations, they won't work. So it's sort of like a double whammy. You want it so bad, you're stopping yourself from attaining it. And when you don't want it so bad, even if you don't want it, you'll get it. Something like that. How can they universally cause innumerable worlds to shake? This is one of the signs, or the, we were talking about this week in one of the classes. In this wonderful text that I'm going to be talking more about this in the next couple talks, maybe more, because we've just gotten back to the Avatamsaka prologue, which is a massive commentary by Cheng Guang, the scholar monk from the Tang, also called Qingliang Guoshi, National Master Qingliang. And he wrote this incredible commentary to the Avatamsaka Sutra. If you read that commentary, you will no longer come to my Friday night class. I'm just telling you, you're going to go, wait a minute. This is different between an orchestra and a kid blowing on a whistle. But any event, his commentary is absolutely, and he talks about one of the conditions surrounding the arisal of the teaching are these signs or portents. And it said, there's displays of lights and colors and so forth, and quaking and shaking. So what this could mean is literally, and if you look at the Lotus Sutra, this is what caused Shariputra to freak out. All of these signs and portents started to happen, and Shariputra's going, whoa, what's going on? What does this mean? Is this a bad sign or a good sign? And so he went, I think he went to Manjushri, actually. I'm trying to think. He went to Manjushri. Manjushri says, oh, it's okay, this happens. This happens about when the Buddha's about to do an incredible teaching. And he goes, whoa. And then he's going, whoa, wait a minute. I thought I had arrived, so how could there be an incredible teaching I don't know about yet? Whoa, thus begins the Lotus Sutra. But these are explained as signs or portents that cause living beings to take note. And they're also, if you look at them another way, they're sort of a readjustment of the whole sphere of the material world. Now, these signs are said also to accompany great sages when they pass away. You'll read, when they die or pass away, a light is released. The birds sing in a different way. Sometimes there is a wind that appears, or a shaking or a quaking of the earth associated with their coming into being or their passing. I don't know exactly how to explain all that. I'm not even going to try, because if you have a strictly empirical scientific mind, your paradigm will not hold this. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen just because your paradigm doesn't hold it. And it doesn't mean that it's just metaphor and simile, although you could read it this way. Oh, it's about something big about to happen. We were talking about it from the sort of biophysical side of saying, when you have a spiritual inkling or a spiritual moment or a change in your orientation about something, there can be a kind of a quaking. There can kind of be a shaking in your physical form, a tingling of, say, energy, a rush of something that is just in neurotransmitters and the bioskin and the whole thing. And people report these things. So they meet a great teacher, they meet a great sage, and suddenly they feel tears, for example, could be a sign of a kind of shaking, a transformational pre-event. So you can see this from a micro level. Even when you read a certain text, there's a stirring in your heart of something. There's a pulsing of a change. And I think this could be taken from the micro up to the macro level. Anyhow, how can they display innumerable exquisite adornments? This has to do with, they're said to be the marks and characteristics of enlightened ones, that their actual physical appearance changes to something of inspiring awe, and sometimes trepidation too. So people who encounter sages like this sometimes will feel this awe. It's just like, wow, that almost like a cold, cold, rainy night, and suddenly the sun comes up and you just feel this warmth and you go, oh, wow. Sometimes it's a shaking of trepidation, because in the light of whatever they have, you see your own flaws and mistakes and shortcomings. And there's this kind of humbling, not embarrassment exactly, but a sobering feeling of, I can do better. I can be a better person than this. So it's a mirror-like quality. These are the adornments they talk about. They speak of them as basically the adornments of virtue. And then how can they manifest an infinite variety of states of being? Now this is a very interesting one. It's almost as if it's saying that these enlightened beings can change their states of being. They can change their basic appearance. And then you go on further, because in the Bodhisattva's vows, they make vows to basically hang out with living beings and manifest similar deeds. So they work together side by side in order to have these affinities to teach from the ground level up rather than from the top down. And this is how they manifest various states of beings. But manifest doesn't mean they actually become that state of being. So while they can manifest, and you see this in chapter 39, in Suna's chapter, some of his teachers are military men, some are kings, some are courtesans, some are beggars, some are awesomely scary, and some of them are just heartwarmingly melting. And these are the various states of being, and yet none of these distinctions exist within the Dharma nature, this passage ends. So fundamentally, since the Dharma nature is one and whole, how do all these variations come about? So these are the questions that are being asked. Now, if we look back, we're looking at, it's a similar pattern with karma. When you look back to, what is it, page 7 and 8, you got basically all beings are essentially the same, and yet they have all these differences that manifest. And then you say, the same thing with karma. It's all these differences, and yet the nature of karma is one and the same. And now we get almost as if, in response to the world of karma, where living beings are sort of caught revolving in cause and effect, caught on a merry-go-round you can't get out of. You can maybe switch places. We had a merry-go-round in our town, and it had a zebra, a lion, a horse, a unicorn, and you get on the pole, and then if you're really chicken shit, you'd get on this little cart, like Cinderella's. You could sit inside. It was very safe, right? And it'd go round and around. And one time the machine broke, and it didn't stop. And the parents were all freaking out. The kids were like, woo, woo. And then after the kids are going, woo, woo, like pretty soon, like, get me off of here. And so the karmic revolving of samsara is considered to be like a merry-go-round. And then depending on who you're with, like I always wanted to ride on that unicorn, and my sister would never give it up. We'd get there, she'd grab the unicorn, and that was it. Can I ride? Nope. And I ran out of tickets, and I wouldn't get to ride the unicorn. So anyhow, I'm digressing, but the idea is that as much as we change those animals that we're riding on, we're still on the merry-go-round. So you can be in the hells, asuras, devas, ghosts, and so forth, different beings on the merry-go-round, but it's still going round and round and round. So this idea here then gets into the question beyond karma: how do Buddhas and Bodhisattvas enter the merry-go-round and not get dizzy, if I could use a metaphor? How do they get on that and slow it down, or in time speed it up, or change it around, and eventually cause the beings on that to look outside the merry-go-round, beyond the music and the lights, and say, whoa, this is getting old, to awaken to that. Because what happens, according to the text, is one's on one particular ride or cycle, just like jobs we do, or places we live, or relationships, when we get so habituated to it, we don't see any other reference point. It becomes a self-referential whole. And we never, until something really shocking happens, maybe even some sickness or death, do we realize we've been in this cycle. We've been caught. Sometimes it's just as simple as going to another country and traveling. And then you come back and realize I've been completely enculturated here. I'm completely assimilated in a bad way. I'm thinking only of me or my country or my clan or my area. And you go out and you expand your horizons, you come back and say, whoa, there's a whole other thing going on out there. And then you see yours in a different perspective. how the bodhisattvas are able to do this is in this lines here. How do they use innumerable dharmas, meaning different teachings? How do they appear in all these different lands? Buddha lands basically are lands where Buddhas can come from. Okay, so it doesn't mean, why would they go to Buddha lands, right? Think about it. Why would they appear in Buddha lands that had already been perfectly accomplished? So they're going to lands that have the potential to become awakened spaces. And that only happens when the beings in those spaces awaken. So they transform into different beings, they expound to different so on and so forth. They do all these differences and all, why? Why do they do that? And this is the answer. Then virtuous leader Bodhisattva answered in verse, disciple of the Buddha, what you ask about is profound and difficult to fathom. End. So next week we will go into the next chapter because there's obviously no answer to this. Why does he say that? It's profound and difficult to fathom. This is a very interesting line. Because I was just talking to someone tonight and said, I don't get this Avatamsaka. And it's like, what's going on here? And so I spent a whole hour kind of doing a synopsis of the Avatamsaka and where it come from. And finally when I was done, it was like, I think the comment was, whoa. You're like, whoa. And then, whoa, this is mind-blowing. But he was also saying, I don't fathom it yet. So it wasn't just wonder, it was like wonder. Wonder awe, wonder question. So why do you think this is here? Why is the first answer from virtuous leader, Bodhisattva, saying it's profound and difficult to fathom? Any sense?
Maybe because using the rational mind to fathom is not the way to get there.
Okay, so that you have two statements there. One is that it is not the realm of the rational mind, and therefore, to get there would require some other form of inquiry or understanding. So there's two parts to that, which is legit. It's almost, especially if you ask about the spiritual penetrations and the manifestation, because normally there's no scientific textbook that addresses any of something like this, right? When you die, they talk about transformation, but it's the rotting and the various stages of the flesh, and but they're not talking about manifesting in different forms. So he's saying that this is the truth, and he's accepted as the truth that these are what bodhisattva, thus come ones do, right? They're able to do all these things, and then when virtuous leader has to answer, and I think that's a fair question, how are we to explain this to you? Now, of course, it's a setup because Manjushri is able to understand this, but it's also being spoken for us. So what is this telling us? And then it says, wise ones are able to know and find constant joy in the Buddha's virtues. So it's like, what do these things have? Why, what are they getting at here? One, it's difficult. The second line is, wise ones are able to know. And then the last one, constant joy in Buddha's virtues. Got a take? Anybody? Don't be shy. Okay, so we did the first one. Go ahead.
Just like the sense of self. So like for fears, illusions, anxieties, the mind is always like preoccupied with the movie in front of us. And so we kind of just get distracted all the time with the sense of individualism.
So the constant joy would be the opposite of the anxiety. Interesting. And the second line is very interesting. Wise ones are able to know. So it's not unknowable, even though we may not know it. That's a very different thing to say something's unknowable as opposed to I don't know it yet. So there's a hint here that it could be known. And then secondly, it's not like an anxiety or troubling consternation of mind. There's actually joy in knowing this. Very interesting. And then he goes on and he says, and now he's using a series of, again, you'll see the same metaphors that were used previously. Remember, we had earth, fire, sea, water, wings of a bird, and so forth. So using similes or metaphors from nature. I was just thinking, at this time, let's just say this is 2,000 some years ago, people were really in touch. These were the current metaphors, right? Because you were in the earth, working the earth, in the outdoors, and da-da-da. I'm thinking for a modern mind, it's like, what's that? What's nature? Because we're so out of touch with the natural world and living so much in an artificially generated, unnatural world that often, and I found this true with the many of the parables and whatnot that involve animals. Even the Jataka tales, the children today can't relate because they maybe heard about these animals or they've seen them in a Discovery Channel thing, but they've never really been up there. The difference between seeing an elephant on the Discovery Channel and being alongside an elephant is really, yeah. Okay, anyhow. He says it's profound, but nonetheless, he goes on, and partly this is a technique that's used in all the sutras to, it's actually one of the ways one is trained to teach from these texts is to use metaphor and simile and analogies. This is part of the rhetoric of teaching. And my teacher really encouraged us to do this, to take specifics that is understandable for people and use those for bridges for things that are hard to fathom. So in this case, virtuous leader responds with, as the earth is of a single nature that allows sentient beings upon it their individuality without thoughts of difference on the part of the earth, thus too is all Buddha's dharmas. So he's basically saying the earth itself is of a single nature. No matter where you go, earth is earth, right? I mean, it might be a little hotter, a little cooler, but you still have the same elements. And yet, on that single element of earth, we have all this diversity of beings and animals and creatures and so forth. I'm going to do a little editorial here, and we're losing them day by day. So just the diversity is being diminished day by day. Thousands of species are going extinct every day because some have more individuality than others. Do you remember Animal Farm? All men are all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. It's Orwell's tale. You should read. Oh, see, I'm going to make a pitch here for literature tonight. So read Orwell. Again, you could read. You all know, what did Orwell write? Anybody know in here? Name a work by Orwell. I just did, and you're going, well, I forgot what it was. Animal Farm. So Animal Farm is an allegory using animals to describe human behavior. I'm not going to tell you what it's about, but you're going to read it and say, wow, this is really relevant. Okay, another piece of his? 1984. Have you heard of 1984? Nobody? Some have. What is it about? Huh? Orwellian, yeah, but it was written by Orwell, so that's a redundancy. What is it about? Right, it's about a totalitarian control, but mostly deeply on the ground of the mind and psychology. Any event, not relevant today. Whoa, you talk about what we have is attention capitalism. That is what it's being talked about here. So interesting, I just read an article saying, gee, Orwell's name is appearing all over the place now. We thought it was passé. No, and this guy was saying Orwellianism and the fears of Orwellianism are now in the last 4 to 5, 6 weeks showing up all over in the news. Wonder why. Anyhow, so Orwell talks about the loss of freedom and the loss of agency. And in this case, how some dominate and others don't, even though they're all considered equal. So when he says allows beings their individuality, this is the nature of the earth. He says, the earth doesn't discriminate. The earth just is there and it does what it does. If it has tornadoes and hurricanes, it doesn't say consciously, I'm going to punish or reward. It just simply does it. And he says the nature of Buddha Dharma is all the same. So I will pause here tonight with the thought of fulfilling a promise. But I really want to spend more time on this. So next week, I'm going to use some of the prologue, Chung Guan's prologue, to go into this particular passage of text. And the first line I'll just throw out tonight is, he asks the same question that Manjushri is asking. Why does the teaching come about? And why is it this way and diverse and whatnot? And the first sentence of his prologue, which is called the first door, so he has 10 doors. Very interesting. He breaks his commentary down to doors. And why? It's very interesting because if you think of doors, they're portals of entry, but they're also portals of exit. And so he uses the term of doors to indicate when you read a sutra, it's a door of entry, but it's also a door of exit. You leave one world of confusion and attachment and enter another world of awakening. So the door works both ways. And so basically, his commentary is a way of saying how you can enter a sutra and how also you can allow a sutra to enter you. And he has both dimensions here. So he talks about it as it has a instructive element and it has a transformative element. It allows you to see things in ways you didn't see it before. It opens a vista, but at the same time it's like a mirror that shows you where you are. And thus, you can exit and change. So it's almost, I wouldn't say it's a revolving door because that's samsaric. But it is, if you think about it, often when you go through a door, you're going into something, but equally, you're getting the hell out of something, right? So it's like, where's the exit? You get someplace you don't want to be, you're looking for the exit. Before, you're looking for the entrance. And so seeing the sutra as an exit door really matches with his 10 doors. Anyway, he starts his first door when he's saying, why is the teaching, why does it arise? And he simply says, the Dharma is that way. That's his answer. And then I'll quote you this passage as a teaser. Now, of course, you've all left behind desires and cravings, so I can't tease you at all, but I'll try. He says, the way of sagely kings, meaning the enlightened ones, is broad and level. And from high antiquity, their rule the same. The single vehicle's door to the mysterious to which all Buddhas identically certify. Therefore, of all Buddhas, the Dharma is that way. In infinite worlds, they always turn the wheel of Dharma, which is infinite in that way. You see how this matches the first passage here we just did? Causing all living beings to return to the origin and go back to the source. To the exhaustion of the boundaries of the future, they do not rest. So what he's saying in the first thing is, this Dharma, although it has all these variations and differentiations, is one thing to cause living beings to return to the origin and go back to the source. In other words, to enter the gate of return, to turn around. And that is the Buddha nature. So this is very interesting. that in his first listing, and he goes through 10 others, and we'll look at these as we go on this next couple weeks until we take our break. But he answers the first question here that's posed by Manjushri. Why is it that they can, innumerable, let's see the first one. All thus come one's enlightened to only one Dharma. That's what the prologue just said. Then why did they explain the numeral dharmas? To cause living beings to return and go back to the source. And then the whole thing has to do with, Changguan will go on to explain, therefore, all these many dharmas are basically one. They have one intent, one purpose, just as all the streams return to the ocean. So it's a beautiful, yeah. But, of course, I was going to do a whole bunch of this tonight, and I ran out of time. So, but I promised you the cheesecake story, not the cheesecake, yeah, and a few other things. But I also found some interesting stuff I'd like to play around with. My teacher did not like the term Buddhism, and he wanted to change it. And he changed it to the teaching of all living beings, the teaching of humanity, the teaching of the mind, the highest psychology, and took away the ism and took away the location, and said, whoever has wisdom is speaking Buddha. It's Buddha Vachana, the voice of the Buddha. If you don't have it, even though you call yourself and you have the title, it's still not Buddhism. So it's the teaching of wisdom. In any event, and he said this doesn't have a location, a place, or a vestibule that's apart from any place else in the world. The wisdom traditions can flow and unite. So every once in a while I find quotes that have this flavor to them. And I'm always drawn to these, whether it's the Western tradition, the Asian tradition, and so forth. So here's one. Remember we were talking about karma? And basically it says, everything you do, think, or say, the three karmas, body, speech, and mind, plants a cause. Intentional actions of this then bring about a return. Okay? So you have to guess who this is. This is the fun part, this quote. All that a person does, says, thinks is of consequence. Not a move can a man or woman make that affects him or her in a day, a month, any part of the direct lifetime or the hour of death, but the same affects him or her onward after, through the indirect lifetime. Now, if I'd said that, you might have said, well, that was the Buddha. But it wasn't. Any guesses? And the reason I like this, it's really a tough one, because it doesn't give you any kind of clues who might have said that. All that a person does, says, thinks is of consequence. Not a move can a man or woman make that affects him or her in a day or month or any part of direct lifetime or the hour of death, but the same affects him or her onward after. Going once, going twice. For $1,000, for $2,000. Walt Whitman, the American poet of the mid-19th century. Okay. Anyway, I thought, yeah. He had very interesting lines. He has this line, he says, I have heard what the talkers were talking, the talk of the beginning and the end, but I do not talk of the beginning or the end. There was never any more inception than there is now, nor any more youth or age than there is now, and will never be any more perfection than there is now, nor any more heaven and hell than there is now. Now, this is his poetic, this is from the Song of Myself, but it's poetic. And on the other hand, you feel the Buddhist thing. Remember last week we talked about Faust, and Where is hell? Hell is in the state of mind of the here and now where you are, and so on and so forth. You see a resonance here with this understanding that takes time and space and just makes it really, consciousness is the key defining characteristic of that. So more of this next week. I just like to find these things and share them with you. Let's see. Yeah. And if we have time, a poem. But, Tai and Ming again. Did you find the reference? You were looking for the poem, the Tai and Ming poem.
Yes.
Oh, you got it. Okay. So I'll do another one tonight, maybe, if we have time. Let's see, does this turn on? That's not the one I want. Oh, no. Once again, I am truly Hutu. I bet this doesn't light up. Okay, I will try with my squinting eyes. This is the actual journal from the pilgrimage. This is simply entitled Cheesecake. Yes, would you? A transference of light. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's good. Okay, so where we are at this bowing time, we're in Devil's Slide. Everybody know where Devil's Slide is? California? Yeah. Okay. That was before they put in the new highway and that whole thing, so it really was a slide. It was very dangerous. This young lady comes up with picnic supplies as an offering. Seemingly, and I'm writing this, overly sincere. Overly sincere. Kind of suspicious, but I ignored it. And this was my mistake. Master Hua told me not to be moved by anything whatsoever, good or bad, not to look forward and not to regret, simply attend to the here and now, and mostly test your emotions. And so we had been going through a period where offerings were scarce. I was going and picking greens from the side of the road I knew were edible, and we had some rice, and so suddenly this young lady turns up with salami sandwiches, garlic crackers, red wine, and I got chicken, and a six-pack of beer, and Pepsi, and cheesecake. So there I am, and I'm going, whoa. So we don't drink cola. And obviously, we don't eat and drink all the other things. And so I should have followed my instincts and said, this is very suspicious. Why would somebody offer all these things? But I took the cheesecake. And anyhow, so after lunch, and Heng Sure had taken a resolve at that point not to eat sweets anymore because he realized that he had an attachment to sweets. And he wrote in his journal about this, that it was like when he got sweets, his mind became mumbled and jumbled, and he'd get almost like drunk. And so he was really trying hard. So on one hand, I accept the cheesecake sitting there. We're eating everything else except no salami, chicken and whatnot. And then I can feel his controlling himself not to eat the cheesecake. So I'm going to be the bodhisattva and accept the offer and eat all the cheesecake. So down it goes. And within about 20 or 30 minutes, I felt this chilling bolt through my body. My mind was a haze. My body was loose and out of control, disoriented, and a drunken confusion. Really strong. And the ground was quaking and shaking, but it wasn't quaking and shaking because of some divine sign. It was quaking and shaking because I was hallucinating. So I go down to a bow and the ground would be whoa, whoa, and I come up and the sky would go whoa, whoa, and the ground was undulating sort of like an escalator up. Anyhow. And then this car comes by and there's this giggling, flirting young woman, the same woman in it. And she says, come on, let's get to know each other. Take some pictures, cutie. And I go, oh my God, what's this about? And then she says, hey, Monk, how'd you like the cheesecake? Wow. And gives this loud and actually kind of eerie laugh, and then drives off. And as a result of that, I was knocked out. My lesson from that was I should have trusted my instincts and turned the whole thing down, and I didn't. Nonetheless, I bring it up to say that well, Master Wa's thing was whatever you can't see through and put down will obstruct you. And that was my Achilles heel there at that time. But what was interesting about it is this did not go away. So all afternoon, and I'm supposed to be the Dharma protector, but all afternoon I was in this haze and a fog, hallucinating and stumbling around and trying to hold it together. And that went on all night. And when I woke up in the morning, it was still going on. That's when you start to get a little panicky. And I thought, what am I going to do here? What was I given? And then I had this, I was sitting in meditation, and as I sat in meditation, an image came to me of a medicine jar. And then I remembered when we began the pilgrimage, this was months before, Master Hua had given me a plastic screw-top container with some herbs and medicine in it. I said, well, what is this for? He says, just keep it. You might need it. So I threw it under the seat of the old Plymouth, the 56 Plymouth, and just forgot about it, because it was like 7, 8, 9 months later. And then I'm sitting in meditation, and the image of that medicine comes to my mind. And I think, I wonder. And so I stagger to the front seat, reach under the car seat, and there's the plastic bottle. And so I take it out, and I think, well, what the heck? Open it up, put a couple of the herbs, chew them and swallow them. Within a half hour, the whole state had passed. And I was back and returned to health again. So there's no moral to this story exactly, but it does bring up some of the things that the text was talking about tonight, hard to fathom, difficult to understand. How does one make sense of those things? How did Master Hua know that this medicine would come in handy, and so forth, or whatnot? I was very grateful to have it. To this day, I don't know what it was. And we might have used it again or not. I don't even remember, but just an interesting story from the pilgrimage. Be careful what you eat. Okay, I'm sorry it's so disconnected tonight, but that happens towards the end of the semester with me and my flighty mind. Any questions or comments you want to ask or raise? You can, no problem. Block anything? Going once, going twice. Oh, the poem? No. Should we do the poem or not? You up for a poem? Okay. This is one of my favorite poets, Tao Yunming, also called Dao Qian. Okay, so here it is. And the reason I chose this poem was only for one line at the end. In Chengguan's commentary, he says, when the mind reaches the highest stage, ancient and present fuse into one. All time is one time, and all place is one place. This is part of, so here's the poem. For a life returned to the way, to the Tao, you begin with food and clothes. This is very interesting. Who can ignore what we need most and still hope to find Earth's own composure? How can you, basically, I think what he's saying here, what we need most is food, clothes, and sleep. The Tao begins with and doesn't go beyond the mastery of those basics. It's the ground right under your feet. And how do you get he's saying that, how do you get this tranquility and serenity of the earth itself? Hope to find her and ignore that. So you don't get the way by mortifying the flesh or renouncing it, but mastering it somehow. Next lines. The task begun in early spring drags on. But then I see another year's harvest. Go out at dawn, and after an easy day's work, haul grain home at dusk. Now, heavy dew and frost blankets this hill country, and wind is turning cold. How could farm life be anything but bitter? No one avoids these troubles. But my arms and legs are so tired they ache. I couldn't bear any more worries. I wash, then sit down beneath the eaves, relax, cheered by wine. How far away hermits chew in knee. Now he's referring to sagely hermits 1,000 years away, he says, and we're of one mind. All I want is more the same, much more. Working on your own fields is no cause for lament. So this man is the same, I'm going home, my fields and gardens are choked with weeds, that sense here. But now he brings up the metaphor of the farming, tilling the ground and whatnot. And he's saying, how can anything come from the ground that's given to you to till? You work on your ground, your mind ground, your body, your elements of who you are, not seeking outside. So when he says, there's no cause for lament, working on your own fields. It's a really beautiful line. And in other words, whatever it is, don't get melancholy, don't lament, don't get freaked out. Just attend to that. That's where the work has to become. But then he has this wonderful line. He says, and when you do this, even though you're 1,000 years away from these two sages or whatnot, we're of one mind. And this then breaks down to the timeliness, the timely nature of these things, that what the text was saying tonight, when you reach that stage, the kingly sages or whatnot, they're of the one mind. It's not two minds or three minds. And it doesn't matter time or place or space or anything like that. It's a universal, almost unchanging realization or truth. That's the joy and peace they talk about. So this year, Early Rice Harvested in the West Field is the title, which really doesn't say much, but another one that I really like. Okay, Kao Yin Ming. All right, nothing else? No questions? No questions you dare ask? Okay, we'll do the transference. I don't know that there's any announcements, and Ken, who usually announces, isn't here tonight, so. DRBU semester's ending. Commencement will be the 24th. You're all welcome to come in Ukiah and see the graduation, if you like. You have an announcement.
There will be a
Amitofo. So there will be a first of time. Once and the first time, we have a Ukiah book fair on May the 17th in CDTB. And this is the first time where we are introducing everybody. Some of the it is for children's book fair. So it is really just like all the families are welcome. It's totally free. And we have lots of fun activities as well. This is mainly just to invite everybody to try to nurture a culture of like lifelong learning, and there will be we have a lot of like participants already, and also a lot of award-winning authors of the children's book illustrations. Also, Master Jinro should be there as well. So it's gonna be very fun, and this is from CDTB. I think it starts at 10 a.m. on May the 17th. So it's about 2 or 3 weeks from now. So you are welcome to join.
And 1 week before commencement, because commencement's on the 24th.
So I think on May we have a lot of activities, so a lot of opportunities to come to CTV. You're all welcome.
By the way, at commencement afterwards, they have some pretty yummy goods, things to eat. So I know I couldn't tempt any of you with that, but okay, the transference in English. May every living being our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Bow in respect to the triple jewel.